You are listening to the Meeting House here on Faith Radio outside the exhibit hall at the International Christian Retail Show in St. Louis at the Americas Center. And I am joined by Richard Blackaby. He is the president of Blackaby Ministries International, which, any relation to Henry Blackaby? I know people have heard of him and experiencing God and all that. Any relation, or is this another Blackaby?
A distant one. I'm his oldest son.
Okay. So you've taken over the ministry.
Yes.
So that means you're his boss.
I am his boss. I have to remind him of that, but he is the president emeritus, and I'm the president who actually does all the work these days.
Okay. And you have 3 kids.
Yes.
And they're all involved in ministry and writing. You've got Michael and Daniel. I've actually interviewed the 2 of them.
Oh, yeah?
They wrote the book together, which was called, help me here, it's late in the afternoon.
When Worlds Collide.
When Worlds Collide.
Yeah.
And your daughter, Carrie, is sitting right here.
She's the prettiest one of my children. Yes.
And the brothers will probably go along with that, I would think. And Carrie is actually, you are studying for not 1, but 2 master's degree at this time. You're a bachelor's from North Greenville University, and you're studying at Converse College and New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary at the same time.
Yeah, I am. I'm getting my Master of Fine Arts from Converse College, and then I decided I wanted some theology training too. And so now I'm also taking classes from New Orleans Seminary, so it keeps me pretty busy.
So how did your dad enlist you to actually write a book with him?
Well, it was kind of strange how it started, but we just kind of got talking about it, and he was really interested in working on a book kind of about family, but he decided it would be an interesting perspective to, instead of having 2 parents writing about it, to have a parent and then also hear from the child's perspective. So.
Well, and that's, Richard, to me, that sounds like a step out in faith. When you actually are writing a book about parenting and asking your kids kind of, well, how did I do? So yeah, that's good. Well done. That's a lot of confidence.
Well, when you're a speaker and you're speaking on something, it's one thing to talk about family when no one in the audience knows you. But if one of your family members is sitting there, all of a sudden there's an accountability. And so I thought, what a great way to write a book where you've got a child right there to verify everything and then add their own perspective. So this is a great way to try to write a book on this kind of subject.
Yeah, it's very unique. It's called, by the way, Off Course, Rethinking Best Parenting Practices So Your Child Can Thrive. So how did you come up with the title?
I'll tell you, of all the things that I've experienced in speaking and traveling around the world, it is parents coming up heartbroken over what's happening with their kids. I mean, I just see so much heartache. And a lot of these parents will say, I could see the signs. I could see my child was struggling. They were struggling at school. Some of their friends were leading them astray. And I did all I knew to do, but then my child crashes and burns. And so this book is a book for parents, especially for parents who I think deep down in their hearts know that they should be doing some things differently, but that's what everyone else does with their kids. And so they're following the crowd, even though in their hearts I think they know that a particular child needs perhaps a customized approach. But for most of us, we just do the same things we've done with all of our kids or what was done with us.
And this is so cool. And Carrie, let me ask you how it is that you and your dad, did you sit down and craft an outline, or how is it that you kind of got your thoughts together and got on the same page for this book?
Well, we discussed it a lot before we started writing it, and basically we just kind of looked through my childhood and my brother's, and all along we've kind of noticed that some of the ways that we've done things haven't always been the same way that our friends did, or the way that other people did, or even the way a lot of people tell you you're supposed to do it. And so we really started with a few of those ideas, and then we just from there organized it into different kind of categories, and that's how we came up with the outline for the book.
So it's kind of a countercultural home then.
It's funny because all my kids have turned out great. They're all in seminary, trained for ministry. So they look and you think, wow, you must have just followed all the rules and the way that everybody does it. And yet we broke all kinds of rules. We did all kinds of stuff. There are times where other couples are actually mortified when they hear about stuff we did, and yet they look at our kids and say, but how did they turn out so well? And for a lot, we began to realize, in our heart, we just had to go with what God was telling us to do for our kids. And it scandalizes some people, but I'm all about the product. And I'd say, you know what, we're really pleased with the product, even if you don't agree with the process that got us there.
Well, Richard, I'm going to return to that concept, what you just said about doing some things that seemed to be, well, that some parents were kind of looking at you kind of squirrely about. Yeah. But yet you got to look at the end result.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you about some of those things, and I'm going to ask you about growing up Blackaby, Carrie, as I look at you there. Carrie Blackaby, along with her dad, Richard, and they, of course, Richard is the son of Henry Blackaby, making Carrie the granddaughter, and it's great to have the two of you here. Off Course is the title of the book, and we will have more coming up here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio. Well, you are listening to Meeting House here on Faith Radio. Richard and Carrie Blackaby are joining us here on the program today from ICRS, the International Christian Retail Show in St. Louis. Okay, so Richard, you were talking about how other parents looked at what was going on in the Blackaby home and kind of scratching their heads, but yet things turned out okay anyway, in your estimation. So what were some of those things?
I'll give you an example or two. One is, I know a lot of, especially Christian parents, who are so determined that their kids will turn out well that they just surround their kids with all kinds of rules and regulations and curfews and threats if they break any of those. And in our household, if we had 3 rules, that's probably about as many as our kids could list for you. And when people see our kids all serving God and training in ministry, in seminary for ministry, they say, well, how could you have gotten that with so few rules? But for us, it was not about the rules, it was about character. And what I see with a lot of families is they've got lots of rules. They're really short on building character in their kids. We thought if they got the right character, you don't need a lot of rules. And so when people start asking us, well, what were your curfews? My kids look at you bewildered, like, what's a curfew? We didn't have that. And so many times there were just things we didn't even bother to deal with because we knew we were addressing the heart. And another one that we found was manners. We had friends of ours that would teach their kids to say yes sir, no sir, and so on, all those kind of things, which are all fine to do, but at the same time their kids would be selfish, or they'd be self-centered or demanding. They'd say please and thank you, but they were very self-centered people. And for us, we just decided, let's not worry so much about the externals, let's just worry again about the heart. Let's make them thoughtful people. And again, people look at us and say, well, why don't you teach your kids to say all these things? We'd say, well, we want to teach our kids to be a certain thing.
Well, let's talk about and I've just got to think there was a book that Ted Tripp wrote a number of years ago called Shepherding a Child's Heart. And it was one that we were exposed to very early on. And, I resonate with what you're saying here, because so often we try to deal with the externals.
Yeah.
And we craft a framework for our kids to basically operate in. What you're saying is deal with the character, teach character, live character, model that, and then once the kids pick up on that, then in a sense they become more responsible and I guess you could say self-governing, but we really know that it's the Holy Spirit that's doing the governing. Is that kind of what you're...
I remember being with a friend of mine one time, and their child came up and kept interrupting, and the parents kept saying, remember to say excuse me. And so the child would say excuse me, and then they would continue to interrupt. And we would say, and then they would look at, for you? And my kids didn't necessarily say excuse me, but they would stand for 15 minutes so that they didn't interrupt. And finally you look at this child and say, Carrie, did you need something? Oh yeah, well, I'm thirsty. I just want to know if I can get a drink. And our friends looked at us and thought, well, you can't be very good parents because you don't teach your kids to say excuse me. We looked at them and thought, but they're thoughtful. Like, they don't interrupt. They realize a conversation's going on. They wait for a lull. And so, again, we just find a lot of parents who worry about the externals and they miss the heart. We figure if our kid learns how to be thoughtful, they'll work out all the things that they say along the way.
Well, Carrie, let's now get your side of the story, your viewpoint on some of these matters, as your dad was just sharing about the way that they were emphasizing character. What did that mean to you growing up?
I think it just really taught us to think of why we did certain things, and they weren't necessarily because mom and dad said you can't do that, so you don't do that. It was really just emphasizing why you want to be a person of character, and by modeling that, we saw a great example of it every day in our lives, and it they also weren't afraid to talk to us about the reasons why they would have an opinion about something. So instead of it just being some rule that we didn't understand, and as soon as we got 18 and moved out, we didn't have to follow, they had a dialogue with us, and so we grew to appreciate the values they had instead of just the rules that they'd given us.
Well, Richard and Carrie Blackaby joining me today here at ICRS 2013, and we will wrap up as we continue to talk about some of the principles of the new book, Off Course, Rethinking Best Parenting Practices So Your Child Can Thrive. Closing thoughts straight ahead here on the Meeting House on Faith Radio. Well, Richard and Carrie Blackaby joining us today here at ICRS 2013. The two of you have written the book Off Course. So just from a, I guess, formatic standpoint, how is it written? Is it kind of a he said, she said sort of thing, or how did you all craft this or put it together?
Well, Carrie is an amazing storyteller, and so I've said, Carrie, just tell lots of hilarious stories about our family, and there's no shortage of material. And so I've really given her an opportunity just to tell some amazing stories about our family in a very delightful way, and then we both delve into the principles that come out of that. But it's an entertaining story, but it's what a delight to be able to write with a daughter who's that talented. I think she may be the most talented of the Blackaby writers, and to give her a chance just to write in a delightful way about family, I think, besides all the great teaching, I think it's just going to be an enjoyable read.
So you've got a book that has teaching, but it also has the stories to illustrate the principles that you're relating. Yeah. So what's maybe your favorite story or two growing up?
I think, well, the opening story of the book talks about my experience as the only girl growing up with two older brothers, and how as a kid, instead of playing with Barbies and all of that, I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle and do everything that they did. So I guess the journey of me surviving with two sometimes obnoxious older brothers.
Sometimes they were sleeping, so they weren't as obnoxious.
Yeah, there we go. Yes. Well, it's great to have the two of you here. And how can people find out more information about Off Course and the various materials through Blackaby Ministries International?
Certainly, they can go to our website at www.blackaby.org. Amazon and various Christian retail outlets will be carrying it as well. It's produced by Russell Media, and you can go to their site as well. But we're excited about helping parents just think through, again, what they're doing and having the courage to follow their heart and the Spirit of God to make whatever adjustments they need so their children will thrive.
Excellent. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having us.
So much for stopping by.
Thank you for having us.
So much.